Hey there, welcome. So over here we talk about how we manage our finances the kingdom way. And today we're going to talk about the exact framework that you need to implement in your life so you can have a budget that makes sense, that you can stick to, and that'll keep you aligned to God's purposes and God's plans for your life. Now, if you're looking at the title of this video, you're probably thinking, well, if we're going to talk about budgeting, if we're going to talk about money, and we're going to talk about it in a Christian way, applying biblical principles, you're probably thinking, I'm going to start talking about giving. But giving is good. You know, giving is a strong principle. It's a strong kingdom principle, but we're actually not going to talk about giving. So you're wrong. We are not going to talk about giving in this video. I will create a separate video where we will talk about the importance of giving when it comes to your finances. But you know what? You can't give if you're not stewarding well, right? I want us to come out of the mindset of thinking, I'm just going to tithe, or I'm just going to give, and then everything else will sort itself out. I want us to talk about practical ways and practical things that we can implement in our finances, right? So we can be good stewards. And so that good stewardship will allow us to be generous givers. So look at generosity as the fruit of stewardship, right? Not the actual base foundation, but as the fruit of good stewardship. So I promised you a framework, and I always like to tie my advice, I always like to tie my videos to a biblical story or a biblical principle. And so today we're going to look at the story of Nehemiah. If you have not read the story of Nehemiah, I request that you do, because it's really powerful. It talks about a builder. It talks about Nehemiah, who was a cupbearer for a king. And this king was actually a secular king. He did not believe in Nehemiah's God, right? Which is our God. But Nehemiah worked for him. He was actually in a high position. He was a cupbearer for the king. And long story short, Nehemiah is told by God to rebuild the walls in Jerusalem. Okay. And so we look at these stories and we want to apply them in our own lives, right? Sometimes we get direction from God to build something that maybe has never been built, or rebuild something that has been destroyed, right? And so Nehemiah is given this instruction by God to rebuild the walls in Jerusalem. And we're going to look at what exactly Nehemiah did, the exact steps that he took, right, to rebuild the walls in Jerusalem. We're going to talk about his level of stewardship. And after that, I'm going to talk about the framework that I promised that we're going to discuss. That'll help you create your own budget. That'll help you create a budget that you will be accountable to, and that'll be easy to manage, and that'll make everything make sense. Okay. So let's break down the story of Nehemiah and how he rebuilt the walls in Jerusalem, right? When Nehemiah heard that the walls in Jerusalem were destroyed, he was very frustrated about it. He was hurt, but he didn't just complain about it or cry about it. He executed a plan to fix the problem, right? And so in the story of Nehemiah, we can see that Nehemiah prayed, and then he planned, and then he presented a proposal to the king, and then he executed it with wisdom and strategy and order, right? So we're not just complaining, we're not just praying, but we also execute a plan, right? With order and with the right strategy so that we can get the results, right? We can get good results from being obedient. So for Nehemiah, this was not just a passion project. It was a financial and operational assignment from God on his life. And I do believe that if you're watching this video, you have a financial and operational assignment on your life. And so what did Nehemiah do? Nehemiah knew what he needed. He requested specific assistance and specific materials and permits so that he could get the work done. Now, side note, Nehemiah got the materials that he needed from the king. The king was a secular king. And so I'm speaking to Christian entrepreneurs out there, and just Christians in general, Christian builders, kingdom builders out there. Sometimes your funding will come from a source that is not kingdom, right? And so don't discount the source. In the story of Nehemiah, the source of his funding was a secular king. He still funded the vision that God gave Nehemiah. So we do not want to be so religious and so spiritual that we are of no earthly good, right? Sometimes your work, your kingdom work, could be funded by something that's typically not considered kingdom. For example, some people may be called to work in the entertainment industry, in Hollywood or in movies, and we don't want to be so religious that we just look down on that worldly system that they're working in and not realize that God can use a secular king or secular kingdom to bless you and to fund the vision that he has given you. Now, I'm not saying go into stuff that is illegal or obviously stuff that's against the Bible. When you're in those environments, you're still operating as a Christian, right? With Christian rules, under Christian principles. But what I'm saying is, do not discount the source of the funding, right? So let's break down the framework that I promised to tell you about when it comes to budgeting. Now, I like to do either a countdown or like acronyms so that they're easier to remember. Today, I want us to use the acronym FAITH, FAITH, for creating the budget, for creating a biblically based budget, right? So using the story of Nehemiah, number one, we're going to use the letter F, right? F is focus on the owner. So Nehemiah focused on the plan that God gave him. Nehemiah focused on being obedient, right? The earth is the Lord's and everything in it belongs to God, right? So knowing that God is the owner and you're just a steward is the first step of creating your budget in this faith framework, right? Before you do anything, you want to pray first. Just as Nehemiah did, he prayed first before he did anything. Prayer was his first step, right? So faith, the F in faith, focus on the owner and really focus on the task, right? Focus on your why. If you're in a business, you want to focus on your why, on being obedient. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why have you created the business that you're creating, right? You need to focus, and specifically focus on the owner of the finances when you're creating a budget. And so pray first, okay? Number two, A, assess your current flow. Many times people rush to create a budget without even looking at what they're currently doing. So what I advise even my clients is begin to look at what your current flow looks like, what the money looks like that's coming in, what the money looks like that's going out. Assess what you currently have before you create a budget. So the beginning of the budget is really the tracking process. It's just tracking where every dollar is going. This is how big business does it, and you should apply it in your small business and in your personal life, right? You assess what you're doing first before you create a budget. When you're creating a budget, you're looking at past experience, you're looking at past spending, you're looking at past revenue that came in first. And then you want to say, well, we're going to budget, times 10%. For the next year, we want to go up 10% in our revenue, and we want to either reduce 5% in our expenses or maintain the same level of expenses as income. But you want to budget based on what you currently have. So A is assess your current flow. Okay. Now in the story of Nehemiah, how we would apply this is Nehemiah counted the cost first. He first had the timber to go and build. He had the manpower to go and build. He sought the manpower to build. He also requested letters for safe passage on his way to go and build. So he assessed what he was doing first before he went off. He didn't just wake up one morning and say, I'm going to rebuild the wall without a plan, right? So assess your current situation and figure out what you need, right, before you move forward with creating a budget. So you don't want to guess when you're creating a budget. You want to be really clear, okay? F is focus and A is assess your current flow. And then I, okay, the I in faith, you want to identify your needs versus your desires, okay? In business, that looks like maybe we need to market right now. We need to advertise right now so we can get more clients, right? But based on the current inflow of finances, maybe we're not ready yet to put an ad on a plane, right? But maybe we can put an ad in a gym, right? Or maybe we can put a billboard in our local community, right? So it's assessing. You do need to market more, advertise more in your business, but what level, right? Based on the finances that you have. So coming out of overspending necessarily, right? Even in your personal life, yes, maybe you do need a really, really nice comfortable pair of shoes, right? But does it have to be that really high designer level heel, right? It could be a good brand. It doesn't have to be cheap, but it could be a good brand that really suits your budget at this time. And then later on, when you have met your income goals or revenue goals, you can take it a step up and get that higher level, right? So I'm not saying deny yourself and not get that high level thing. What I'm saying is it depends on the money that you're making, right? It depends on your cash inflow, okay? So identify your needs versus your desires, right? And it doesn't mean that you're foregoing your desires. It just means that you're pushing them forward to a time when you will be able to get those, right? You can even put them in your 1-year plan or 2-year plan, or even do it as a reward. If I meet these goals that I have, then I will get those really nice shoes, or I get that really expensive bag, right? Or in a business, if we meet these income goals with the current level of marketing, right? If we up our marketing or advertising budget to this level that we can afford right now, once that advertising starts to bring in more money, return on investment is really good, then you can say, well, now we're ready to create that wrap on that plane that we always wanted to do, right? That advertising wrap in that, or put that billboard in that airport that we want to do for our business so we can bring in more clientele, right? So it's about identifying your current needs versus your desires for the future. So we're now at the letter T, trim. Trim what doesn't serve the mission, okay? Now in the story of Nehemiah, in Nehemiah 5:14, Nehemiah had the opportunity to get a governor's allowance because of the work that he was doing, but he really did not want to burden the people. He was already well off, I'm assuming, or he had enough funds, and so he had the opportunity to ask for more money to get a high allowance, but he didn't, just because he was focused on the mission, right? And he didn't want to burden the people that were already suffering, right, under heavy taxes. He didn't want to burden them even more just for his own personal gain, right? Now, I want you to hear me. I'm not saying that you shouldn't get paid for work that you do. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying was that in this case, he focused on the mission, right? He was intentional about the mission, and anything that didn't serve the mission, anything that was not part of the plan, did not apply in this season. Now, in your business, you could have a current mission that you are serving, right? And in that mission, you have a specific amount of money that you want to stick to for that mission, right? And so you do not want to get distracted. So even in your personal life, if you are on a mission of, let's say, paying off debt or getting your savings to a certain level, right? You want to cut out all distractions in this period and just focus on that mission, right? If the mission is paying off debt, if the mission is getting your savings to a certain level, right? You want to trim what doesn't serve the mission in this period. So I hope that makes sense. So FAIT. Now we have one more letter H, right? To get to the acronym of faith. So if you follow this framework, you will see that you will be able to create a budget that makes sense, that you can be accountable to, and that you can stick to. So H, the letter H. Hold yourself accountable. Again, we go back to the story of Nehemiah. And in the story of Nehemiah, if you go to chapter 6, he was so accountable. He said, I'm doing a great work right now, and I cannot come down. So it meant he was not going to get distracted. He was going to hold himself accountable because he wanted to get the work done. And if you read the story, Jeremiah got the wall built in a record amount of time. He was able to get the work done, right? And so in your budget, you want to hold yourself accountable. Holding yourself accountable looks like having check-ins. It looks like having guards around your money, right? It looks like setting up systems so you can have some accountability when it comes to your money. In your business, it looks like having someone else that you're accountable to. You're already running a business. You're already doing a lot of things. You want to have a team that you're accountable to when it comes to your finances. If you're not in a place to have a full team, you should at least have a fractional team that you can be accountable to, and you can have monthly check-ins or quarterly check-ins with your business finances, just to make sure that you're in line with the budget that you created, right? So that you can succeed with your goals, right? Even in your personal life, you could have an outside source, an outside coach, your person that you can be accountable to. If you don't trust yourself, if you haven't grown to the level of trusting yourself to stick to the budget, you want to have an outside source that you're accountable to, that you have check-ins with, whether weekly check-ins, monthly check-ins, or quarterly check-ins, or even yearly check-ins. But I think quarterly should be like the absolute minimum of check-ins in your personal life and in your business life, to hold you accountable to the goals that you set for yourself, that you set for your success. So we go back to the acronym FAITH, right? FAITH. Focus, assess your current needs, identify what are needs and what are desires, trim what doesn't serve the mission, and then hold yourself accountable. I hope this helped you today. And if this helped you, I want you to like, comment, subscribe. I want you to comment below so I can know which of these will you be applying. If you've applied the framework, or if you decide on applying the framework, let me know how it works out for you.